Think back to April 3rd, 1974.
This is an emergency. This is a disaster. We have never had nothing like this in my lifetime.
It was a Wednesday, the kind of spring day that felt more like early summer. The air was heavy, sticky with humidity, and the sky was a hazy, washed-out blue. In the Midwest and the South, people went to work in short sleeves. Kids played baseball in the parks, grateful for the break from the winter chill. It felt like a gift, but nobody, not the families eating dinner, not the drivers on the interstate, and certainly not the weathermen squinting at their primitive radar screens, knew that the atmosphere was loading a weapon. This wasn't just a storm front moving through, this was a meteorological ambush. Above the clouds, the jet stream was screaming at 150 miles per hour, colliding with a mass of hot, dry air from the desert and warm moisture from the Gulf. By early afternoon, the sky didn't just turn gray, it turned a sickly, bruised green. And then, all at once, the war began.
Warning out again.
Persons in treated courts and mobile homes elsewhere are urged to evacuate and get to a place of safety.
This wasn't a siege like a winter blizzard, it was an airstrike. In a span of just 16 hours, 148 tornadoes touched down across 13 states. From the Great Lakes to the Deep South, the map of the United States was strafed by wind. It was the night nature declared war on the American heartland, not against an enemy you could see, but against the sky itself, turning against the people below. The super outbreak of 1974 wasn't just a weather event, it was a benchmark. It was the day we learned that the wind could erase a town from the face of the earth in less than 60 seconds. And for those who lived through it, the sound of a siren still makes the hair on the back of their neck stand up, even 50 years later. It started deceptively. That morning, the forecast mentioned showers and thunderstorms, routine stuff for April. People thought it might be a noisy night, maybe some hail. They were wrong. In Indiana and Kentucky, the morning sun was bright. It lulled people into a false sense of security. You have to remember, in 1974, we didn't have the technology we have today. There were no smartphones to chirp with instant warnings in your pocket. There was no Doppler radar showing the red hook of a vortex on a high-definition TV screen. You had a weatherman standing in front of a paper map with a magic marker, drawing lines that were already obsolete by the time he drew them. By 2 p.m., the deception was over. The first sirens began to wail, but even then, people hesitated. We've all heard sirens before. You think, it's probably in the next county. You finish your coffee. You wait for the rain. But this time, the rain didn't come first. The roar came first. The horror of 1974 is defined by one name: Xenia. Xenia, Ohio, was a quiet, prosperous town, a place where people moved to raise families. At 4:30 p.m., as people were driving home from work, a monster formed on the horizon. This wasn't a standard tornado, it was an F5. The finger of God. It was a wedge of churning black debris nearly a mile wide. It didn't move like a normal storm. It tore across the landscape with the speed of a race car.
Swath, maybe 3 city blocks wide.
It was just a big roar, and I don't know. It was just terrible.
My daughter and her husband and baby were at a root beer stand, and it was blown down, and they found them.
It hit the town of Xenia with a violence that is hard to comprehend. It didn't just knock buildings down, it disintegrated them. Houses were reduced to splinters. Cars were thrown onto the roofs of buildings like toys tossed by a toddler. Xenia High School was gutted, its buses tossed into the cafeteria. The sound was the thing everyone remembers.
Finally got worse, so we headed around the house and got under the house there. Got in this corner right over here.
Survivors didn't describe it as wind. They described it as a mechanical roar, like 1,000 freight trains screaming at once. It was a sound so loud it vibrated in your chest, a sound that meant death was coming, and there was nowhere to run. In minutes, half the town was gone. 33 people died in Xenia alone. The photos from the next day looked like Hiroshima. There were no landmarks left, just a field of debris where a neighborhood used to be. But Xenia wasn't alone. In Brandenburg, Kentucky, another F5 crossed the Ohio River and scoured the earth. In Gwynn, Alabama, a tornado so powerful it ripped the pavement off the streets struck in the dead of night. This wasn't one tragedy, it was 148 tragedies happening simultaneously. Life at home became a terrifying game of hide and seek. When the sirens finally cut through the air, or when the power grid failed and the clock stopped, the domestic routine shattered. Families scrambled. There was no time to pack. Mothers grabbed their children and ran for the basement. If you didn't have a basement, you huddled in the bathtub or under a heavy oak dining table. You grabbed a mattress to cover the kids, trying to shield them from the glass that was about to explode inward. Inside those dark, damp cellars, the wait was agonizing. You held your breath, you listened. You heard the hail pounding the roof, stones the size of baseballs smashing the shingles. Then the pressure dropped. Your ears popped painfully. The air in the house was sucked out, and then the roar passed over. For some, it was a near miss. A tree down in the yard, a few shingles missing. For others, the domestic struggle changed in an instant. The roof was gone. The sky was looking down into the living room. The rain was falling on the sofa. Everything you owned, the family photos, the furniture, the clothes, was wet, broken, and scattered across 3 counties. You simply endured. There was no choice but to survive. You checked on the kids, you checked for blood, and then you tried to find a way out of the rubble. When the sun rose on April 4th, the scale of the destruction was impossible to process. The power was out across huge swathes of the country. There were no streetlights, no traffic signals. The landscape had been rewritten, forests were flattened, towns were unrecognizable. But here's what nobody tells you about the super outbreak. It wasn't just about the wind, it was about the people. When the storms cleared, the fences between neighbors disappeared, literally blown away. People who had barely spoken before knocked on each other's doors, or what was left of their doors. They shared flashlights, blankets, and water. Strangers became rescuers. In Xenia, before the National Guard could even deploy, farmers used their tractors to move debris off the roads so ambulances could get through. Teenage boys ran into unstable ruins to pull out trapped survivors. There was no waiting for the government. There was no waiting for FEMA. There was just you, your neighbor, and a shovel. In school gymnasiums and church halls that were still standing, thousands of homeless families slept on cots. They were fed by volunteers who cooked vats of soup on camping stoves. You'd sit with folks you'd never met. Bankers, factory workers, teachers, sharing stories of what you lost, but realizing that you were the lucky ones because you were still there to tell it. There was a resilience that is uniquely American, a stubborn refusal to be beaten by the sky. In the days that followed, hand-painted signs appeared in front of ruined houses. For sale, heavy AC, gone with the wind. A dark, gritty humor that proved the spirit hadn't broken, even if the house had. The 1974 super outbreak changed us. It terrified us, yes, but it also made us smarter. Before 1974, we didn't really understand tornadoes. We thought they were random acts of chaos, but after the outbreak, a scientist named Dr. Ted Fujita surveyed the damage. He flew over the scars in the earth and realized we needed a way to measure this power. He created the F-scale, the Fujita scale, that we still use today, in its enhanced form. Xenia was an F5. Gwynn was an F5. These weren't just storms, they were the upper limit of nature's fury. It also changed the way we watch the weather. It forced the government to invest in better radar, better sirens, better warning systems. The radar on your phone today exists because of the lessons learned in the blood and debris of 1974. But for those who lived through it, the night of 148 tornadoes isn't a history lesson. It's a sensory memory. It's the smell of splintered pine and wet insulation. It's the color of the sky turning that sick, bruised green. It was a time of terror, yes, but looking back, it was also a time when we saw the best in ourselves. When the lights went out and the walls fell down, we didn't run away. We dug in, we rebuilt. It was the night the sky tried to destroy America, but it was also the night that proved America couldn't be destroyed. Were you around in '74? Do you remember the green sky or the sound of the freight train? Drop a comment below and share your story.